years. So I call myself the accidental historian. This is a picture that I took a couple of years ago of the cabin row, the enslaved people's cabin row at McLeod Plantation. I was born adjacent to McLeod Plantation in the Country Club of Charleston in 1952. And I saw the remnants of slavery every day. I mean, I lived there till I was 18 and I went off to college. And so I watched the young children going to that cistern in the middle of the row, and that was where they got their water. And I don't know that I really questioned it much. It was just what it was in 1952. I was truly never interested in history. I'm not from a prestigious named family in Charleston. Quite frankly, I always thought that I was exempt from anything to do with slavery in Charleston, and that was sort of a sigh of relief for me. So this is a deeply personal journey that I'm going to share with you in a way that you could share it with our visitor. So this is about family history from 1758 to 1859 to my own personal research today with the purpose of telling a more complete history here in Charleston. This is my grandmother. Her name was Marie Gruber Dandridge. She was born here in Charleston in 1882, and she lived for 100 years. And so that's me with my grandmother, Bama. I was 19 at the time. I was in college, and I was home for Easter. And as you can tell, I loved her. She was really just my very, very favorite grandparent. And what she had told me and what I understood about our family was that I was fifth generation Charlestonian, and that I came from poor German immigrants on Charleston's east side up by the Cooper River Bridge. So her husband actually finished the third grade. So she finished the eighth, she finished the third. These were poor people, not well educated. And so I felt sorry that she hadn't had some of the opportunities I had. So she grew up just north of the cigar factory on Blake Street. And I always believed it was its number 6 Blake, which has many, many years ago been demolished. And so that was a story that I believed until I was 66 years old. That was the story that my mother and her sister believed. They both lived to be around 90. We didn't ever really know anything else except we were from poor German immigrants. And it wasn't until 2018 that a DNA test revealed that I had an entire branch of my family that were of African descent. And in talking with my new cousins, I found that they couldn't learn about their family on my side unless we went back and I did the ancestry and the history research. So I found back from, again, this is 2018, I went back to something an older cousin who's no longer living had given me in 1983 out of the front of the Gruber family Bible. And it starts talking about people from England, and they all lived in New York. Well, I really wasn't so interested in that. But it was certainly a place for me to start. So I started researching to find out more about this family that was up in New York. Another thing that I got in 1983, and this sort of just, in my opinion, speaks to my own inability to absorb what was presented to me. This is an actual bill of sale for Rachel and Augustus that I was given the same year, 1983. This was a bill of sale from my great-great-grandfather when he purchased them in 1853. And I will just say that I just kind of casually dismissed that as, well, that's just, that's history. And it was framed, so I had it on the wall. This year, I'll say, I'm very proud to say that the Charleston Museum actually took these papers and other things that belong to that part of my family. So as I started my research, I started on the internet, And I started with the name Torrance, Torrans. And I found that this John Torrance, who I thought was in New York, actually came to Charleston. And not only did he come to Charleston, on Easter morning, as I was doing my search, I found this on the internet, and it said that he was a partner in a local firm here in Charleston who brought many Huguenots from England and hundreds of slaves from Africa. And I would just say that that was really shocking to me. I had no idea that I had 3 additional generations, making me 8th generation Charlestonian, and that they had anything to do with the transatlantic slave trade. I then found out that John Torrance belonged to the Circular Congregational Church on Meeting Street. And this is a picture of me actually standing over his tomb that has about 6 of my ancestors in it. Coincidentally, I worked across the street at SCE&G for 6 years and never knew I had any family at the Circular Church, much less, right across the street from me. So it was really just very shocking. So he came here in 1758. He was a British loyalist. Just to tell you a little bit about him, he was born in Derry, Ireland, which is now Londonderry. He came to New York City as a merchant to work with some other folks from Ireland. He was on the side of supplying the French and Indians during the French and Indian War with our colonies. He supplied the enemy. I've had some historians say, historians that I've talked to in Ireland say that these people were really the early industrialists in the United States, that they were driven by profits and wealth. So while he was in New York, he marries the daughter of a very prominent judge, William Smith. So he and Waddell Cunningham come up with this idea that there's even bigger opportunity for the merchants back and forth. They were doing a lot of flaxseed for linen and importation of Europeans to the colonies. And so he came down here in 1758 to do that. So he actually owned many ships, which I have the names of all those ships. He brought French, Irish, and then Africans in the 1760s and 70s. Torrance died here in 1780, in January 1780, right on the eve of the siege of Charleston, which, believe it or not, I'd never even heard of the siege of Charleston until last year. Y'all don't fuss at me that I didn't know my Charleston history. So I thought, well, okay, well, this is John Torrance. He participated in the Atlantic slave trade, and that did not feel good. But I thought, well, let's find out who these other people are that weren't so long ago. So I went to try and find out more about my more recent family from John Torrance. And so I went to Magnolia Cemetery and I started studying, again, the name Gruber, which was my grandmother, and the Payne families that I found were interrelated. And so I looked at, this is actually the obelisk in the center is my great-great-grandfather's tomb. And I thought, well, I guess this guy couldn't have been a poor German immigrant with that size of a marker. So I thought that I had already learned a lot of things, but what I'm going to share with you tonight is what I think is more important for you as a tour guide to share with our visitors. So John Torrance had a daughter named Margaret, and she marries this man named William Payne, who had arrived here in Charleston in 1786. And I through the research that I did, I found out that William Payne, my 4th great-grandfather, came to Charleston with a young man by the name of Edward Butler. And Edward Butler was the nephew of Major Pierce Butler, who is the usually oft forgotten founding father of the United States Constitution. We always think about Pinckney and Rutledge, and Pierce Butler actually took William Payne under his wing, hired him as a clerk, got him going in Charleston, because I can imagine William Payne had no money. But within a few years, Pierce Butler had gotten really mad with both his nephew and William Payne, and he branded William Payne an Irishman, well-versed in hypocrisy and falsehood, and that he was ever the scoundrel. And he also wrote that about both of them, that the allurements and the dissipations in Charleston proved too much for them. Both came here to be rich at once. And for me, that sort of set the tone as to why Torrance came to Charleston and to why William Payne and Edward Butler came to Charleston, because the economy was booming. There was money to be made for the entrepreneur. This is just an example of the research that I did from the South Caroliniana Library in Columbia, where I actually looked at Pierce Butler's letter books where he talked about Edward and William Payne. So I'm going to talk about William Payne and his family here on out. William Payne, again, moved here in 1786. He started a business in 1796 on Broad Street, a little resale store where he was just selling little trinkets and items and things like that. What he would be known, though, after 1802, after he went bankrupt, was he'd be known as a broker, an auctioneer, or a vendue master. And in today's language, we might call him a real estate broker. So what happened in these years was he got in financial trouble. So he hides his assets with his wife, Margaret Payne. He goes bankrupt and he finds a more lucrative line of business. And this is not the transatlantic slave trade. This is the domestic slave trade of local people who are of African descent. Most of my research was done in newspaper ads, and this is just a notice in 1803 that he was going bankrupt. And then for the rest of 1803, every single day, William Payne had an ad that looked almost exactly like this. It says the subscriber will be thankful to his friends and the public for any employment in the brokerage or commission line. And his counting house can be found at the yard of number 131 Broad Street, which today we believe is a much lower number. And I'll tell you more about that. So just to tell you what I've done, because I know that you all, when you're giving tours, you want to have things that are supportable. And what I've learned in the genealogy and the historical community here is you can't talk about anything unless you have source documentation. And I have stayed true to that for this purpose. For my research last summer, not this past summer, but a year and 2 months ago, I spent over 250 hours searching the newspaper ads. I primarily used online research at the Charleston County Public Library. I also used the South Carolina Historical Society and then the South Caroliniana Library at USC. So those are my sources. I'm sure all of y'all do this, but if you don't, this is how a neophyte like me did it. I started searching Payne's name, 1816, and then just look for 1816. He had over 907 results that I had to scour through. So once I would find a result, then I would have to then open up the ad. And in this case, this is an ad where he was actually selling a gang of 80 Negroes. So I did that for 250 hours. So what I have, and I'm certainly willing to share, I have 28 pages of Excel spreadsheets documenting over 1,100 newspaper ads that I've gleaned. And as you'll see on the left, that is basically the location. If the ad said where the people or the property was being sold, this is the date. These are the years. If you see 0 in the next column, that means it was just property. So for example, this was Belle Isle on Cat Island, 620 acres. Anywhere you see numbers, these are the numbers of enslaved, domestic enslaved people that were listed for sale in the ad. If they gave the name of the person's estate who was under which they were selling them, I listed the estate person's name. If you look down here farther, it listed not only the estate, it also gave the first names of the enslaved people. So I did that. Let me back up. So I did that. So if there are any people of African descent that want to try and find their families before 1865, they can use this data as a resource. This one that's highlighted in yellow is about John Ball, 360 people. This was actually included in Edward Ball's book that came out in the late 90s about slaves and his family. William Payne and his sons were the ones that auctioned 360 people from their plantations. Tony Carrier, who's with the International African American Museum, found the bill of sale for the invoice for me, and Payne's commission was 1%, which is a little over $3,000 in today. And those dollars in today's dollars, that is $63,000 that he made in 2 days, or the value of the enslaved people at John Ball's plantations today would be valued at around almost $64 million. If you want to know any more about the specifics of that sale, if you don't already, I found a great book called, it's here at the bottom, called Working Toward Freedom, Sale and Separation, 4 Crises for Enslaved Women on the Ball Plantation by Cheryl Ann Cody. And you can read all kinds of information that I never knew about each of these days of sales and what it did with these different families. So I call this painful business because I think what he did was very painful. And again, these are not people from ships. These are local enslaved people. These are the year of the ads that I went through and the number of people that I've documented that year. So people sold ad year. So it goes from 1796 all the way to 1833 when William Payne died. I'm going to say these are conservative numbers because it is so hard to look through the ads. I don't think I got them all. But in total, what I can say that I have absolutely documented are 9,217 enslaved people that my family sold over a 30-year period. And the way that most of them were sold were through estate sales, mortgage debts, and they also for many years served as an agent for the city of Charleston sheriff, trying to get tax liens collected. So what was interesting to me as I researched Payne is that he and Charles Coatsworth Pinckney, another founder, also founded the Charleston Bible Society in 1810. And Payne served as its first treasurer and Pinckney served as its first president. So for me, it was just hard to imagine that you were spreading, that your mission was to spread the word of God while brokering the sale of humans. So this is an example of an ad, and I'm just going to walk through these ads for you. This is an example of an ad from 1812 showing how William Payne was actually working for the city sheriff. And these were some Negro fellows, and Negro is the name, as I'm sure y'all know, that was used then. And these were for city taxes owed in 1811. The one thing that I think stood out for me was how Negroes were just seen as property and they were used as cash. So in this example, this was a private sale, and this is for a lot on Charleston Green. And in this one, you could either have Negroes would be taken in exchange for the property, or you could do part cash and part Negroes. Very much business. This was one that was interesting to me. That was where you could either sell or rent monthly people. This was a first-rate waiting man and a carriage driver, and he's of warranted good character. And believe me, I started the word warranted quite a bit. And so what I've also learned from this book called Black Slave Owners by Larry Koger, that I just recently connected with him, was that renting enslaved people was one way that the spread of the benefit of that economic system drew people in that wouldn't ordinarily be able to have enough money to own their own. So you might rent them. And certainly the people who had enslaved people were trying to get free people of color to buy them as well. And also his book says that many people, free people of color, bought their families. Not all, but many. Another thing that I learned was many of the enslaved people were highly skilled. And this is an example of a patroon was for sale in 1804. I didn't know what a patroon was. Obviously, that was a highly skilled person who knew how to get around the rivers and the creeks, which we can imagine that that was a person in high demand. And just that he really had an amazing skill set that he brought to the economy of this community. I also learned about the value of family and generations. And I was really happy to see, initially happy to see that many families were sold together, because I had assumed that that was done because people want to keep families together, and that may be one reason. Another reason that I've been told is that that also diminished the chance of enslaved people running away. So these are two families that are being sold at the same time. And this is for Josiah Payne at 28 Broad Street. And Josiah was William's son and my third great uncle. This is one from 1810 where we've got a private sale. This is not an auction. And this is actually 3 generations being sold. A carpenter, a young wench, a woman, a boy, a girl who's 16, and an old woman who is the grandmother to her daughter and her grandchildren. And if they're not sold at private sale, they'll likely go to public. This is another example, and there were many of them. Private sale, valuable family of Negroes, Gardner, his daughter, and her son, about 5 years old. I found this one interesting because this was a woman being sold because she did not like living in the country. And there was definitely, as I'm sure you all know, a huge dividing line about whether you worked in town as an enslaved person or whether you worked in the field in the country. This one stood out for me because it said, a young wench, a cook and a washer with her 2 children and a fine boy, about 5 years old, the other in the arms. Talking about runaways, this was a typical runaway ad back in 1821. This is George 19. Then this is a single day of runaway ads in 1817. Just one single day, there are 6 of them. And there were at least 6 a day. It was just amazing. And it just makes me realize how chaotic a system of enslavement had to be in trying to manage keeping people enslaved. This was one where William Payne was selling a young boy who was 15 years old and 1816, and he speaks both French and English, 15 years old in Charleston. William Payne also did he sold hundreds of plantations. He also sold Folly Island in 1823. I thought that was sort of interesting. And then I guess what really stands out here is that human property was just as any other property. So this is belonging to the estate of Dr. Benjamin St. Mark, deceased, of St. Bartholomew's Parish. He had an aged Negro man, a young Negro man, 2 guns, a watch, a harness, 610 and 6 tablespoons, a pair of shoe buckles, and a pencil case of silver. Human property all put in the same list with intangible property. This is just another one, Negroes and furniture. We sold Negroes and furniture in the same ad by William Payne. This also spoke to me in terms of how personal William Payne had to be in crafting these ads, because his whole reason for his business was to make these enslaved people sound really valuable. It was a marketing strategy, because the more valuable they were, the more money he could get for the owner or the city or whomever it was, and the bigger his commission. So this was David, a first-rate painter, Archie, a laborer, and he's a very orderly fellow, Sally, a first-rate cook. We got good cooks. We've got people accustomed to the field. We've got an elderly woman who's a first-rate nurse. I mean, these were highly descriptive sales mechanisms. And then this ad, I won't comment on, small boys, which will be sold singly. This is an ad from 1828. And one of the things that I've been trying to do in this research was partially about was to prove that people were actually sold within my family's business on Broad Street, you know, not just north of the Exchange or at Ryan's Mart or any of those places, but in that building. And so this was the first one that I found from 1828, where it says they may be seen at our office between hours of 11 and 2 for a few days, 28 Broad Street. 28 Broad, well, let me just say 28 Broad is now 32 Broad, which is actually, you won't find that number, and I'll show you in a minute. But Nick Butler at the library said to me, because Payne and his family lived upstairs, I said, well, how did they keep them? And he says, well, they likely, now this is Nick Butler, likely had a holding pen somewhere on the first floor. So this is a picture that I just found, and I can't remember where I found it now. And if anybody knows where that picture is, please let me know. This is part of being 68. You can't remember certain things. This is a picture of Germania Savings Bank at 34 Broad. And so 32 Broad and 34 Broad are all one place now. And that's what it looks like today, right? So what is called South State Bank on the right-hand side, if you're looking at the screen, is 32, and the left-hand side is 34. So what I'm trying to encourage people here in Charleston to do, those that are interested in research, is to do the same sort of research that I've done. So I've done William and John W. Payne and Josiah Payne all at what was 28 Broad. I've also identified the people, the traders who worked in that building up until 1861, which is Thomas Hume, Roland Rhett, and I.S.K. Bennett. Then these are the other auctioneers that I have found that were at 26, 27, 29, 30, 1 State Street, Broad Street, that nobody that I know of has done any research on how many people they sold. I will say that Alonzo White seemed to be a king of his time in the 1850s. So if anybody's interested in research, I would really appreciate working with you on that. So what we know is street sales were outlawed in 1856. Private sales continued at what was then 28 Broad Street. I'm just showing you some ads from 1859. This is from the Charleston Mercury. This is I.S.K. Bennett and Roland Rhett in 1860. They just continue to have sales after my family rented the building to them. And then these are just some examples of my Excel spreadsheet showing the other auctioneers and traders, just so you have an idea of how in-depth this is. So if you're interested in domestic slave trade research, these are my research. These are the people that I've actually given the research to: Virginia Ellison, Tony Carrier, the Charleston Museum, Joe McGill at Slave Dwelling Project, Ancy Bailey, who's with the 1619 Project out of New York Times. They're kind of following what we're doing or what I'm doing here. And then there's a Facebook group, Donna Cox Baker is Beyond Kin. And so what I'm working on right now is trying to get a historical Margaret Payne's office and residence at that, what is now South State Bank. And I've had support from Doreen Larimer. Many of you may know her. She's the historical deeds researcher who has just been amazing support to me. Nick Butler, Bernie Powers. And we're trying to go the private route with the owners. They seem to be open to it. If not, then I will go to the state route. So this is about my grandmother and a more complete history of Charleston that's revealed just by simply going through what's available. The one thing that I'll tell you is, remember, I always thought my grandmother was from 6 Blake Street and that had been demolished. And I just imagined it was some old pitiful little, you know, ramshackle building. Well, last year I got a picture from another cousin that she found somewhere. And I found that she actually grew up at 28 Blake Street, right above the cigar factory. And that is a picture of her house. That's actually my grandmother standing there on the left in her house. And then this is a picture of it today that I took last year. And then this is what it looks like from the side. And it was for sale last year for $1.2 million. So I'll just go back to this slide and just say thank you for listening. And I'm open to any questions or comments or anything, because I consider you guys the experts. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, right?
Yes, please.
So thank you.
So if anybody has a question, you can chat it to me, or you can unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. That was so interesting.
Who is this?
Alice Gordon, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any way we can get a copy of your presentation?
Yes.
So online, or can you email it to us, or one of us?
I can, can I send it to Julia?
Yes, send it to me and I'll send it to Serge to send out.
And what I'll do, if you don't mind, is I'll put it in PDF format.
That'll be good.
Margaret, thank you. That was fascinating.
Who's that?
Teresa Smythe.
Hi.
Oh, thank you.
Anybody else?
I just want to say that was amazing. That's an amazing amount of work.
Hi,
And
Erin.
that is, it is fascinating.
That's Erin
Great.
Mellon.
Melanie,
Erin,
yeah.
Pat, yeah, hey.
We know each other.
I didn't realize that Bob had such an organized party working with him. That is great.
But like also maybe on Serge's email, we could have your contact information.
Sure.
I know other people that might be interested in following up on some issues.
Well, that's really great. And, you know, I just feel like, you know, there things just happen for a reason. And I just think that this part of history has not been researched or in Charleston. I mean, it just hasn't. I mean, Nick Butler has just been my biggest supporter, because that's not an area that anybody's really been interested in. And I just think if there's ever a time to own the truth, the time is now in this country. And I think that Charleston can really be a shining light for others, that we can do this. We can talk about the truth.
So this is Ruth. I just wanted to say, hey, I just know what research entails. And when I saw everything you've got there, it's overwhelming. It really, really is. I mean, you know, that's the kind of thing that will go on for lifetimes and people will keep adding to. Yes.
Coming from you, Ruth Miller, I am honored.
Well, I've never researched anything that far. I like to get experts.
I'm gonna tell you, it was like I couldn't stop.
Yeah, you get into something and you think, got it. Yeah. Anyway,
Margaret, thank you. Thank you so much. It's the second time I've heard your presentation and I learned even more tonight. It's a lot to take in, and what a magnificent job you've done. Thank you.
Thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
So was there anything that that stood out for you, maybe that you didn't know before, or that shocked you or surprised you? I mean, because I want feedback, because I mean, I was a national speaker. So I mean, I'm going on the circuit. I mean, this COVID has kind of sidelined me. Was it anything new, or?
You're directing that to everybody, Margaret, or just me?
Oh, I'm sorry, Red, to anybody.
Good. I thought tonight's, and maybe it was the venue of being on a, you know, feeling like you're just in my room, it just had more impact. When I saw you before, it was in a larger venue, and you know, a slideshow up on at the front, and I thought it was fascinating. But a lot of this is new to me. You know, a lot of the concepts are new, and we think of so much of the importation from Africa. And when you start thinking about domestic trade, I mean, you didn't have to explain it to us, but you may have to explain to somebody else.
Were you there at the College of Charleston?
That's where I was. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Zoom is better for this too. So thank you. Anything stood out for anybody? Red, I know you've seen it before too, a long time ago when I first.
I did, and you were still in the shock stage when you made the presentation at Bishop Gadsden. What surprised me, which I didn't hear before, was so many locations on Broad Street. I mean, we know about Chalmers Street and we know about Slave Mart locations, but not Broad Street like that. And the South State Bank. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
Isn't that something?
Margaret,
it was wonderful.
Who is
hello.
it?
Can you hear me?
Who is it?
Teresa T. Hilliard.
Hey, Teresa Hiller.
Hi, Teresa Hilliard. Yeah, I was surprised about all of the private sales.
Yeah.
And like Retta, that so many was done on Broad Street. I mean, yeah, like, we know about all, the Exchange and certainly the Slave Mart. But when I saw Broad Street, I was like, wow. Yeah, that was interesting. And all of the, private sales and families. That was pretty new to me because I had read that there were some families, but then this is a whole lot. There were a whole lot of families together.
I mean, I just say, I don't know how many of you are parents or how many of you are grandparents, but just can you imagine that you watch you're watching your children, your grandchildren, you're all being sold together. I mean, that's just sort of unimaginable to me. And I try and imagine, I don't think I can. It's just unimaginable. And the perspective on it, I will tell you that Nick Butler told me that he believes, now when Nick Butler speaks, I believe him, right? He told me that he thinks that there were traffic jams on Broad Street because so many people were getting sold on the street.
Why do you think your grandmother did she not know any of this, or it was hidden, or do you think she just didn't know? Nobody told her? Do you have any idea?
I'm going to tell you, my mother did. I mean, none of us knew. And I just think that after the Civil War, all they had was that house. They lost everything, right? I mean, they were in the trade. So they lost everything except for their house. And so I just think that my grandmother, maybe she has some shame from her family being so poor, but she didn't know. But I will tell you, one thing that I just remembered recently was I remember my grandmother telling me one time that when she was young, she played up in the attic as a little girl, and they had barrels of Confederate dollars.
Wow.
Barrels.
God.
Told me that when I was a kid.
Barrels of Confederate dollars. So
Wow.
So I was interested, you started on this because you found the African-American fifth cousin. Did you ever come up with how some of your family gets mixed with the African-American community?
Yes. That Judge William Smith that I spoke of, he had 12 children. His daughter was Elizabeth Blanche Smith that married John Torrance and came to Charleston in 1758. They had 12 children. And Elizabeth Blanche Smith's brother, Joshua Het Smith, is the lineage to my cousins of African descent. So it's out of the New York. And Joshua Het Smith, who is my Black cousin's ancestor, was tried for treason with Benedict Arnold.
Wow.
Wow.
So anyway, and my Black cousin, Trisha, who's Pearlstein's niece, she lives in Philadelphia. All my Black cousins from that side of the family are in St. Augustine, which makes a lot of sense, right?
Yes.
But she's up in Philadelphia and she's an IT analyst, and her hobby is genealogy and DNA. So she's helped me, like, she's just been great. Yeah, that's the connection. Now, 23andMe said that my sixth great grandparent is 100% West African, and I cannot trace that. But what I am trying to do is I'm trying to trace the people here in Charleston that my family owned. And I'm not having any luck. And so if anybody knows how to trace enslaved people on bills of sale forward, I'm looking for help. Tony Carrier is really busy right now, but anybody other than her, I'm really looking for help.
So we will get Margaret's PDF. And Margaret, in your PDF, your last page, can you just make your contact information in there so it's included?
That'd be great.
Get Serge to send it out. Are there any other questions?
How about advice?
I was just going to compliment Julia on being such an IT wonder for us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was wonderful.
I'm glad we could do it. So thank y'all for attending. And I think Leanne got everybody's name, so she'll be.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Bye, Hollis. Bye, Ann. Bye, Jane. Bye, Aaron. Bye, Pat. Bye, Rhett. Bye, Retta. Bye, new friends. Did I see Jane Thornhill?
Bye, Margaret and Bob.
And Bob.
Oh, Bob, goodbye.
Bye, Bob.
Yeah.
Please, y'all, if y'all have any questions, y'all call me now. I'm happy to share this because it is, and if you know anybody who wants to help me with research, please get in touch.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.